So, the learning outcomes for today. So, self care is important for volunteers, and we're going to talk about the concepts of secondary trauma, compassion, fatigue, and burnout. We're going to also talk about avenues for support and self care, and I'm going to give you some resources for making a self care plan. And we're going to do some activities to actually start putting these concepts into practice as well. I'm going to use a definition that the Black Dog Institute uses, which is an organisation in Australia that offers support for mental health, including depression, and it's been around for a long time. And they have some great resources, and I'm going to share those with you. The slides and the recording will be available, but I'll also share with you some other resources, which I'll talk about a bit later on. So one definition of self-care is referring to the activities and practices that we deliberately choose to engage in on a regular basis to maintain and enhance our health and well-being. And I think that the key words in this one is deliberately choose, because it's something you actually have to make time for. And it's great that everyone is attending this session and recognizing that it is something that is really important and worth putting time into learning more about and practicing. So I think it's really important to remember that self-care in volunteer roles is just as important as in paid roles or as in other aspects of our life. But I think because often when we're volunteering, volunteers will take on that you've got a lot of things happening. You might have other paid work, you might have family carer responsibilities, you've got lots of things happening. And then when we're caring for people in a volunteer role, we have to make sure that we're also looking out for ourselves, because there can be stresses that we take on and things that impact us that actually impact on our ability to perform in that role, and can impact other areas of our life as well. So there's also another really good site that I use for my training, which is Very Well Mind, and there's some great insight into mental health and well-being, which is when you can take time to actually make sure that you're looking after your mental well-being. And we're less able to handle the stresses that come our way when we're depleted, so physically and emotionally. And so by taking time out for self-care, it means that you're more resilient and better equipped to actually handle stress. And that can have impacts, physically and emotionally. So one thing I think is important to think about with self-care as well is that there's different aspects that you need to think about. So this is just a snapshot of it's a visual representation on a quality volunteer experience. So I've used this before in training, but I think it's really relevant here because it's talking about the importance of being balanced, and it's about having enjoyment as well. Volunteering is supposed to be, something that you can enjoy, and sometimes it can be hard work, sometimes it can be repetitive, or you might get stressed out by your volunteer work, but it should be enjoyable as well. And as a volunteer manager, we want our volunteers to make sure that they're feeling well supported and connected, but balance and time is so important. So as Judy mentioned before, those boundaries around time and around our own well-being are really important. And it's really important to learn to check in with yourself to see when you need to bring some more balance between your volunteer work and your home life and your work or care responsibilities, to make sure that we can stay in a position where we're feeling well and we can actually enjoy the roles that we're doing. So I'm just going to unpack a little bit some concepts around what can happen if you don't practice self-care. So compassion fatigue is a gradual reduction of compassion. So you might actually, feel that you are starting to enjoy less something that was really motivating for you before. So for example, when you first started your role, maybe volunteering, say you were doing Meals on Wheels and you were engaging with the clients and having a good time, when you're starting to get run down, you might find that you're not enjoying it as much and you're starting to actually get irritated, or you're starting to not really connect with the people that you're working with. And this is what we call compassion fatigue. So it's common in volunteering or in occupations such as like nursing or social work, aged care, anything where you're heavily interacting with people and you're giving of yourself in terms of your time and your skills and your energy. That's when we can really start to be fatigued. And also people who care for family members, if you have a heavy caring responsibility, this can have a similar impact. So if you're working in this area, volunteering in this area, and you're also having caring responsibilities, this can really be something that you need to pay close attention to and listen to your own body and to your own self in terms of when you need to take time out. And we're going to go over some practical ways in which we can do that. So burnout and secondary trauma. So there are psychological symptoms of compassion fatigue. So that can be the reduced ability to feel empathy towards a patient or client, or, as I said, being irritated or oversensitive. And it can also present itself in physical symptoms like headaches, fatigue or tiredness, not being able to sleep very well. And if you let that go, it can actually build up and it can lead to anxiety and depression and what we call burnout, which is when you are at a point where you're just exhausted and you're not motivated. And we call this secondary trauma, which is sometimes referred to as vicarious trauma. And that's emotional distress when you've been caring for other people and you start to take on those symptoms and impacts of someone else's trauma. So, for example, I was working for quite some time in refugee settlement, and I found that because I was a case manager and I was doing intake with people who had very traumatic experiences fleeing war and fleeing really difficult situations. And part of my role was to go in depth into how that person was, and not necessarily their stories about what had happened, but the impact was obvious. And after a while, I noticed that if I didn't take time out for myself, that would really impact me. And this is what we call vicarious trauma. So when you haven't been through that traumatic situation, but the exposure to it on a regular basis can actually have the same impact. So just using myself as an example again, like I knew that when I started to get really annoyed with with the clients or with my team members, that it was time for me to take some time out and a break and to look after myself, because I was being impacted by that secondary trauma. So, and this can be for any roles as well, when it doesn't have to be something like nursing or something where you're really involved. It can just be from talking people day to day, like this happens for everyone and everybody has different coping levels and levels of resilience. So it's really good to get to know yourself and your limits and be able to actually respond when you know that you need it. So signs of burnout. So there's signs of burnout like lower performance, reduced creativity, exhaustion, can present itself in stomach aches or other problems. And then also being cynical. So you can start to feel like your supervisor doesn't like you, or you're starting to kind of feel like things are working against you. And these are some signs that you might be burnt out, or you might be heading that way. And that's when it's time to, before that is when it's time to actually really look after yourself, because we don't want to get to that stage where you are burnt out and then you're going to need more time to recover. And we want to try and learn the signs earlier on, so then we can put things in place to not get to that stage of burnout. And actually, there's evidence to show that if you practice these self-care techniques and you build it into a routine weekly, or as often as you can actually build up your resilience so that you're preventing burnout as well, and you can handle stress in better ways. Now I just want to talk in a little bit more detail about some steps and how we can practice self-care. So we touched on it a little bit, but I think organizing your time is something that is really important for volunteers, because for everyone, but in volunteering, because as I said before, we want you to enjoy your role. We want to make sure that it's something that you are balanced in and get a lot out of, and don't overburden yourself. So obviously, some of us will keep a diary or use a calendar or set reminders, but it is really important. It can happen really quickly that all of a sudden you've realized you've double booked yourself, or you've got too many things back to back, and that can really lead to stress as well. And we also, at Leap, we use a program. It's a free program. It's called Asana, ASANA. And basically, it's useful for when you're working with teams. It's basically like a to-do list, but everybody can see it. And so if there's something that you're working on together, you can see when people are progressing, and it's a really good way just to check things off. It's really simple, but it comes with reminders, and you can link it to your calendar as well. So, pen and paper works as well, but if you like to use apps and technology, you can try that. But yeah, it doesn't really matter how you do it, whatever works for you, and just sticking to it and making sure that you really don't overcommit yourself, because that can just really add to that stress and pressure, and you don't need that when you've already got a lot going on. So knowing your limits. So this can relate to energy levels, time, and skills, and learning to recognize when you are starting to feel overwhelmed. So, for me, for example, if I am doing like training like this, I like to have downtime afterwards, because I know if I have to go back to back into meetings, I'm going to feel really burnt out, and not burnt out, but run down, and by the end of the day. So making sure you give yourself sort of that buffer time as well. And then, equally important for volunteering, and just making sure that you can actually have enough time even to travel. Sometimes it's easier now with Zoom, we're not traveling as much, but even rushing from meeting to meeting, it can just really drain you. So making sure that you're aware of how much time you need, scheduling in breaks, scheduling in that time for yourself to wind down at the end of the day. And something that is challenging for some people, who often, when we're working with people and we're in sort of carer roles, or we're in roles where we want to help people, it can be really hard to say no. But it's okay, and it's really important to practice. And it's really important to be comfortable to say to people, look, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I can't fit that in. And I'm always aware of that as a volunteer manager when I'm asking our TechMate volunteers if they can help out or take on an extra client or something like that. I'm always trying to make it so that people have the chance to say no, and that's okay. And I always really try and have a positive response when someone says no, because it's so important. And I think we have to protect our own time, and often people are studying or doing lots of other things as well. So it's really important to practice that. And it's okay just to say, look, I've got too much on this week, I need some time. And there's some really good articles. I really like the website Reach Out. There's a link down the bottom. It's got some great practical resources. So that's another place to go to if you're looking for things to read on self-care. So another important tip is to have fun. So everybody has fun in different ways. Some of us, might like to socialize and get energized if we're an extrovert, we might get energized by speaking to different people, and other people might need that time away after you've been volunteering, talking to people a day. You might need some time, an hour or so to yourself. You might want to watch TV, you might want to read. It doesn't really matter. Everyone can have fun in different ways, but it's really important to make sure you have time to enjoy yourself as well. So if there's a particular program or something that, you know, is going to make you laugh, put the effort in to do it, because it's going to have a positive impact on you, and it's going to increase your performance ultimately, because you're going to have that energy to put in, and do a really good job and to look after yourself. So also, treating yourself. So it's important to look after yourself and give yourself, we were talking about it before, someone mentioned it, but make sure that you have time to do the things that you love. And, you know, you're giving back a lot. It's really important to do that for yourself as well, especially if you're also got caring or family responsibilities. It can be really, really hard, but it's okay to ask for that and to prioritize that. The next thing I want to talk about is support. So we've spoken about this a little bit in terms of where you can go, and a few people have already mentioned some good examples, which is great. So you could go to your peers initially for support, but you can also go to your volunteer supervisor or your work supervisor. You might have a good friend or family member who you can debrief with, or who you can go to just to help boost your mood and how you're going, and share. Often even just sharing with someone that you're stressed and saying it out loud can really make a difference, and can really help you to actually shift, or to come up with ideas of how you can actually make more time for yourself, or to actually decrease your stress. And then of course there's professional support. So, you know, if you need to, there's always, you could go to your GP, or Lifeline or Beyond Blue have some fantastic free counselling services. So never be embarrassed to actually reach out for professional support, and it's important as well. And if you know that you're going through a stressful time, or you've got a lot happening, please make sure that you do that, and encourage your peers to do that as well. And in your organization, there should be you know, you should have received some training on where you can go for this within your organization and with your supervisor. So this next screen is on reachout.com. They actually have some really useful comparison tools of apps. So, you know, there's so many out there. So this is just a screenshot, it's not the whole thing, but there's actually, on this page, there's 54 different apps. And it's really great, because this is a summary of what they are good for, if that makes sense. So for example, if you have a look at this one on the right hand side, the check-in, the goals of the app are to be kinder and help others. So it's checking in with a friend, or having a chat. Then Headspace, for example, is talking about meditation. So managing anxiety, stress, relaxing. I really like this, because it can help you just to, there's so many options out there of apps. It can show you the reviews from other people, and then what the apps are good for. So I would recommend having a look, and there's some great apps that you can use. You could always talk to a friend using these as well. It's something that I think, you know, is an increasing space. There's some really amazing free resources out there, so it's great to make the use of. And of course, reaching out to people in your organization as well when you need to. So when so we're going to have the resources available for download from the LEAP website, and I will send you that information. But what I have done is I've actually built the activities and the things that we've done today around a self-care plan. So there's two that I'm going to provide to you. So I'll just quickly flick between the screens to show you. So one is from Emerging Minds. and then one is from the Black Dog Institute. And the Black Dog Institute actually created this one in the context of COVID. So it's quite useful. But so what we've done today is to address some of these topics so that you can actually then create your own self-care plan. So at the start, personal signs of stress. So that's what we spoke about at the start when we were, talking about signs of stress. So those, getting irritable was one that we spoke about a lot. And also physical signs like headaches or, the things that make us, they're signs that our bodies are saying, I need some time out. So in the idea of a self-care plan is that you actually use this. You could print it off, you could use it online, or you could just, write things out. Sorry, I'm just going to mute. There's a bit of background noise there. And this is the idea that you start to pay attention to how you actually show signs of stress, because sometimes we don't realize, and we can always reflect more. Then you're going to put in strategies that you can use. So the things that we said, going for a walk, talking to someone, using these apps that we were speaking about, even practicing breathing techniques. They do actually work, and they do actually help you to improve your well-being. Then when you need extra support, who you can go to. Put someone's specific name down. It might be at your organization, it might be a family or a friend, but the practice of doing this is actually going to make it easier so that when you really need it, it's there in your mind, because things become more difficult. When you become overwhelmed and you become stressed, these things are going to be harder for you to do. So if you do these and make this plan in a time when you're relaxed and you're feeling good, it's going to be so much easier just to have that there as a resource to go to when you are actually stressed or starting to feel some of those symptoms of compassion fatigue or being overwhelmed. And then writing down, when we write something down, it helps us to commit to it. So putting activities into your routine. So, it could be going for a walk, it could be watching a movie once a week, whatever it is that will help you to unwind and to relax. So that's this template. They're similar. The one from the Black Dog Institute is a little bit more detailed, and it's also good because it actually has a section, it breaks it off into kind of regular stress and then into like a crisis. So if you're somebody who has like everybody goes through crisis and for different reasons, different times, but if you feel like you've got a lot happening in your personal life or at work, or you're managing a stressful situation, you could refer to what they refer to as a crisis plan. So when things get to a point where you really, really need that extra support, it might be that, you make an appointment with your GP, or you call Beyond Blue or something like that. But if you have those resources there ready, it's going to make it much easier for if you do have to go through that stage where you need a stronger response. But this also has, so this is just a screenshot, so the actual template is a lot bigger, but I just wanted to highlight this section because this is also looking at where you can improve, and everybody can always improve in self-care. So you can try something different, maybe something that you've heard today. So you can put your current practices, they could be good, they could be bad, and then the practices you want to try. So for example, physical can be having better healthy food habits, good sleep habits. For me, one of my bad habits is energy drinks. So when I get stressed, I'll go to energy drinks, but then I get worse because I get really anxious because I've had too much caffeine, and I might be producing work faster, but I'm actually getting myself more stressed. So that's something that I need to work on. So instead of that, I could get up and go for a walk outside. For example, emotional. So acknowledging your own accomplishments and being proud of what you do. Like, everybody here who's volunteering, you're giving back, you're doing something that's really valuable to the community. So one thing I also would encourage is when someone says thank you, be in that moment. Like, hopefully your volunteer manager or people that you're volunteering with are saying thank you to you, or a client, or just take it in when someone thanks you. Don't brush it off, just take it in and actually acknowledge it, and let yourself be responding to that in a positive way. It doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong with letting someone appreciate the efforts that you're doing. um, so then yeah, so emotional, so current practices to try. So I'm going to have these available for you. They're just a PDF, so you can type into them. But yeah, I would just encourage you to do that, because everything we went through today, you all had answers, you all had great ideas. So just take that time for yourself to make it personal for you, and fill out those plans.